Well, good afternoon. Walton County Sheriff Mike Adkinson. We're back for the Sheriff Live. We're in if you don't know, we're in Walton County, Florida. I'm here with my trusty public information staff, Ms. Corey DeBridnia, Deputy Tony Bianco, and Ms. Lindsay Darby. And this is the Sheriff Live. It's where I speak to my bosses, the citizens of Walton County, and really anybody that has a question in regard to public safety or something we're doing. What I always say, I give the same caveat. I don't guarantee that I know the answer. I guarantee we will try and get you one. Here's the thing. I'm also frequently wrong. So there's a significant chance we'll have to go back and research something and try and get you a more correct answer. If you don't know where Walton County's at, Walton County, Florida is halfway between Pensacola and Tallahassee. We run from the Alabama line to the coast. And the Walton County Sheriff's Office is a number of different entities. We are traditional policing services. We are traditional jail services. We are fire, EMS, fire rescue services north of the Chattahoochee Bay. We're also our consolidated 911 as well as our animal services. So a lot of things going on. We've been super busy. But first and foremost, let me start with this. So as many of you may be aware, there was an incident in the last couple of weeks where, just very bluntly, our staff did not handle themselves well. And I've always said, and I'll continue to say, that my responsibility as sheriff is to be accountable for the actions of my staff. And when they make a mistake, we have to say they made a mistake, and we have to own that. So on or about August 15th, there was a house fire off Mixon Road area in Mossy Head community. At that time, Walton County Fire Rescue crews were looking for what was originally called in as a wildfire, potentially a fire in the woods. So fire rescue staff ultimately were able to find that a residence was on fire there. Now, once they got on scene, they attempted to go and start combating this fire. Unfortunately, there were two dogs, there were two pit bulls that were the residents' pets that were there inside what was originally a fenced area. And these dogs were doing what dogs do, trying to protect their home. And the fire rescue crews were unable to get out. So for probably 10 or 15 minutes, they were unable to get into this, inside the yard there where the structure was at. The dogs were doing what they thought were the right thing to do, which in this case was trying to bite the people that were trying to get into that yard. This is a distasteful part of the business we're in, which is they called for a deputy sheriff to come down there. The deputy tried to, initially was going to try and use a taser to get past these dogs. For some of you that may or may not have seen the video, there's actually an explosion you'll hear in that. You'll hear some people referring to at least two explosions. When the deputy's on scene, the dogs are out by the fire truck, and they eventually go back to the edge of the yard. Deputy has a taser. The problem with the taser was that it did not lend itself to be able to be used for two animals. It's a new kind of taser. It's designed for people. It's not designed for animals. As this building was continuing to burn, the deputy, at the request of our fire staff and his own decision, made a decision to fire on that dog. Now, there is nothing good about that. It is a distasteful, hard, nasty thing. If that wasn't a hard enough thing that had to happen, what happened next is the part that I'm particularly embarrassed about as your sheriff and as a representative of this organization. Over the course of about 10 or 15 minutes after the initial shooting, and at some point even as late as 20 minutes later, the two deputies were discussing in very graphic terms what had just happened and in very unprofessional and very demeaning conduct. It did not represent this agency well. It did not represent what we are about. It did not represent what the men and women of this organization are about. And that can't be tolerated. And so for that reason, both of those deputies have been disciplined. Here is the reality of discipline. This is going to affect their careers. So, today we're all talking about it, but a year from now, 2 years from now, this is something that's still going to stay with them. Additionally, it affects your trust in what deputy sheriffs are doing when they're out performing their duties, and that hurts this whole organization. Typically, I believe in praising in public and discipline in private, and that is my normal way of doing business. However, in this case, because of the effect it has on the whole reputation, currency of trust with the organization, it just is incumbent upon us to say that yes, they are disciplined. Yes, there are still ongoing things. And no, this is not what we're about. It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to this organization. It's an embarrassment to our profession. And I'm not going to make excuses for it because it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Have to be held accountable. It's not a fun thing to do, but that comes with being the sheriff, right? Two things that are important to know about this, because I think this is one of the things that really caught us off guard, is we actually didn't know about the audio until much later, actually a couple of weeks later when it was released on social media. And one of the questions you may have is, well, how do you not know that? And here's kind of the textbook easy example of this. Every deputy sheriff has audio video on them. We don't review every hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of video every time. So when we have an incident, whether it's a use of force or it's a high-risk incident, we typically only watch the time around the incident. So which called in this case, it's called a use of force. The internal affairs folks that looked at the use of force. Again, distasteful, nobody's happy about it. Is it within policy? And the answer to that is yes. They did not listen to the next 20 minutes of video, which is where these comments came up. And as I said, obviously we are very appalled when we heard this and saw this. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think that all we can do as an organization is try and say, what can we learn from it? How can we be better? One of the things that didn't happen was the night of the actual fire and when the animal was shot, when the dog was shot, Deputy Sheriff apologized to the owner on scene about what had happened that night. What we didn't do is we did not follow up. Nobody from our organization reached out to the owners of the dogs the next day or two. Even though a deputy that night offered to help bury the dog, offered, you know, apologies for what was happening at that point, we didn't follow through. And that's our normal procedure to follow through. So we're trying to get to the bottom of why that call, a follow-up call. By the way, even if the owner doesn't want to speak to you, it's still the right thing to do. So there is that. And none of that is good. None of that is positive. What I always say is that, you know, at the end of the day, it's ultimately my organization. I'm the one accountable and responsible for it. So I have to accept that and apologize on behalf of the sheriff's office for the conduct of that staff. I will answer any questions you have that if it's something I didn't just answer. If it is, I just don't like this, well, I have to tell you, I don't like it either. I don't like anything about it. But if you have a question, please shoot it to us. We will be more than happy to try and answer something that I didn't answer. So with that, Corey, where are we at?
One of the first questions as it pertains to this incident was, why wasn't animal control called?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Initially, they were called,
yes.
But when the animals were showing more aggression towards the firefighters, that's when they requested a deputy come. You can hear the deputy on the body-worn camera and on the dash camera say, I dispatched the animal and animal control can still respond, but you know.
So let's pause and talk about that real quickly, because when you're talking about a residence burning, by the time the deputy's on scene, they have already been in and out of the truck. So the firefighters have tried to get in and out of the vehicle a couple of different times. And on the video, you can see the dogs at the fire truck from that point. The reality is you have to put that fire out because you cannot spread. You know, some of you may remember, probably wasn't 2 or 3, well, probably 3 or 4 years now, where the Musset Bayou fire, which starts as a small fire, and then 47 homes are lost. They have to put the fire out. They have to move forward and do that, and they have to be able to get in there and do it. So, but that's the reason. Originally, they were called.
Why didn't we put out the video originally?
No, I actually just answered that because we didn't actually know that to start with.
The dash cam has since been put out. It's put out on our Facebook page. You can view it.
And pause on that just for a second. And I'm just going to be 100% honest with you about this. Unfortunately, this probably happens where we have, you know, it's not the first time we've unfortunately had to shoot an animal. This does happen. It's again, every situation is different and every circumstance different. but it's never a positive thing. There's no good in this, but it does happen. We don't normally put out videos if we do dispatch an animal to start with. Secondly, in this case, the video, particularly as it pertains to that language, we just didn't know. Literally did not know until later. So that's what makes it so disappointing on behalf of our staff as well, too.
Brian Campbell on YouTube, are body camera failures a common experience, or is this an isolated thing?
It's pretty common. So one of the things that happen in this circumstances, and you know, if I'm just being blunt, it happens quite a bit, is our body cameras are held here in the center of the chest, and sometimes when you move, they slide off. It almost looks like a cell phone. There's a couple of different types of body cameras, but the one we use is right there. The other problem we've had, and some of you have said this before, and we've noticed this as well too, is that if a deputy is shooting, like in the Sandestin shooting, that's one of the things where you'll see this in a couple of, when their hands come up, their arms come up at high ready, it's blocking the view of the body worn camera. So we're trying to, now we've offset them a little bit, but it is a little bit of a problem. The other issue is jackets. When you're wearing external wear, that covers the camera sometimes, so that's problematic as well too.
In this instance, the body worn camera became dislodged, so all you have is the audio.
Correct, and the dash cams from other.
Stell Ranger on Facebook. The question is, why wasn't he arrested and let go? They have fire suits on that dogs can't typically bite through. Talking about the bunker gear.
Why was it who was arrested?
I believe she's referencing the deputy.
No, we're not going to arrest the deputy. Whether I agree with it or not, it's in the performance of a duty. I'm not going to tell a firefighter that they have to be dog bit in order to do that. I myself, I have a bull terrier type dog. I love him. He's a great dog. He's like, in many ways like my child, as they are with so many people. But I also understand that people that are not around dogs and what a dog does when they're scared is two separate things. And so particularly when you're dealing with two dogs, that's separate. They already had about 10 minutes of them, and I don't know if you can hear that. The firefighters were definitely concerned about being bit or attacked by these dogs. So no, we're not going to charge anybody for that.
Mark Holmes wants to know, does the taser not have prongs?
Yeah, so we moved to a new taser about probably 4 months ago, which is, a better taser for human beings. The problem is it doesn't allow a couple things as it regards to it comes to animals. What happens is that it allows for multiple shots, but on a smaller target, they both have to be there, or a third one has to be there for it to get a connection. So think about it from an electricity standpoint. Old tasers, when you fired, two prongs came out at one time, which means there was an immediate shock, for lack of a better way. These new tasers aren't like that. They also don't arc. You'll hear that term arc, or allow for a dry stun. Those don't work as well either. So that, it's one of those things that's supposed to make it a better taser. It depends what it's designed for. And we have a little bit of concern about that as well too. We're trying to talk about what else we can do to try and mitigate this. I mean, nobody wants to do this to start with, right? A lot of it has to say, what is the proper equipment? So even if you have a catch pole, you've got two dogs, you don't have one. And in this case, we need to be in a hurry. This needs to be in a hurry. If we just stood by and let the house burn down and there was a body in it, that would be a lot to answer for. That would be a lot to answer for too. So nothing about any of this is good.
And what he used as part of the taser was more a mechanism of a noise.
Yeah, trying to think that would scare us. But at that point, these dogs are so agitated by fire trucks, sirens, people, and, you're not blaming, you're definitely not blaming the dog, because they're doing what dogs do. They're protecting their home, right? So.
A couple different questions just about asking why didn't they spray the dogs with the water hose? Find alternative mechanisms.
Yeah, so every time they tried to get out of the car, every time the firemen kept trying to get out of the truck, they got run back into the truck. And one of them was continually trying to kick at one of the dogs to get back inside. So yeah, they tried a couple times to get out and do that, but they couldn't get out and get to the hose.
Another question from Facebook, do your deputies not carry pepper spray?
So because of the taser, many do not. In fact, most no longer carry. We're getting to a point where there's a different tool for every day of the week, right? In other words, you carry a baton, and then you carry a taser, and then if somebody else carries pepper spray. So we stopped issuing that because we're getting too many things on this belt. It's kind of it's actually really problematic in dealing with humans, because you get into trying to say which one's the appropriate tool. And we've had problems really even across the nation where officers are going to multiple different tools that are not the right one for the job. So,
Sarah, you addressed this a little bit. Sarah Ann, why did it take a month to hear about this?
No, I'd answer that, I thought, pretty completely. But just the short version of Sarah Ann is that we actually didn't know about the comments until later, because think about this. There were 5 deputies, probably, at least 5, maybe 6, that were on scene at different times. Everybody has body cameras, and so we don't watch every hour and every minute of body cam footage every night. And we'll talk about some of the wrecks that happened here, like, for instance, the one at North Bay, over at the restaurant here at 331 in Chat Holly last week. Just say there was 5 deputies. We wouldn't go through and listen to, probably combined between those, probably 30 plus hours of audio video. We don't go and listen to it after the call to see if something was done wrong. So we really had no idea. The comments came up almost 20 minutes after the initial shooting. So yeah, that's the reason why. So we didn't put it out because we just, quite frankly, didn't know about it. And I was as stunned as anybody else when we heard it. I don't think anybody was pleased, for lack of a better way of putting that.
There was a post about the fire going out. Why did we not post about the dog being shot?
I don't think we've ever done that. We probably, unfortunately, unless we don't even put out when deputies are bit, and they're bit on occasion. Firefighters and deputies are bit on occasion, as well as animal controllers bit. But yeah, I don't think the last 5 or 6 times that we've had to shoot or put an animal down, I don't know that we've ever released that.
Bianca Sefco on Facebook, if they were trying to bite, why can't we see that in the video?
Yeah, so we'll keep in mind, so all with the firefighters primarily happen before the deputy gets there. Secondly, when you see those dogs and they run back, at the point they're going to bite, they're already on top of you, if that makes any sense at all. So you've got 2 dogs. You don't get a sense of concern or worry when you watch a video like that, because we're removed from it, right? So you can't see the dogs. You really don't even hear the dogs as well. You hear them barking some, but that's the reality of it. We're just kind of removed from it. Those dogs were going to stand their ground, and listen, that's what dogs do. They protect their home. So yeah, that's why.
Jessica Caffini on Facebook, she asked that same question about the dash cam not showing the dogs biting. But she goes on to say that the deputy didn't look scared, and the dogs did not approach him. They're basically asking why not wait for animal control, and the fire chief, she's claiming, and it wasn't the fire chief, it was actually the battalion chief. So I don't want to misconstrue that, but she said that he told the homeowner that he either knew nobody was home or there were no survivors.
So let me just pause, because that's kind of a multi-part question, and I unfortunately have had this happen numerous times over the years where we've seen this, where there's bodies in the home, and if we'd let somebody's body, let's just assume there was. First of all, we don't know that for sure. That's a fact. 2, we don't know what else is in there, whether or not it's evidentiary. It's rare for a house to catch fire at 5 o'clock in the morning, right? 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. So there's that. 3, there is a risk to every other residence around there through the woods or whatever situation may be, because we had, again, I'll go back to, we had 47 homes burn in South Walton that started with just a trash pit, started with a trash fire. So these things happen. You cannot just let it burn and not. If we'd have gotten to the bottom, there'd have been a body. You would have said, why did you stand by there and let this home burn completely down? So, that home, that should still be under investigation, what the cause of that fire was. It's just a little anomalous to have a home. That home was actually due to be, I think it was auctioned 2 weeks later. So it was already up, it had been foreclosed, it was up to be auctioned. within 2 weeks, it's sold. There's really no reason for that home to be catching fire. So that's another thing too, but we don't investigate that. The state fire marshal's office will do that.
A lot of people just asking, about what they were saying afterwards.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Asking about animal control.
Yeah. Again, listen, I can't make an excuse for it. I'm not going to make an excuse from it. And I would say, one of the things we did is we called those deputies in and we had them sit down and we played the audio. And he said, explain to me how this represents this organization. You explain to our staff, understand what the public is hearing and what this does to our level of trust. And we made them sit and listen to it all the way through. And I'm not saying that to, to continue to kick them, but it is what it is. It has a reflection on all of us.
There was a question and some comments from someone who expressed that they were a firefighter, who said that it took about 7 minutes after the shooting for fire to put water on the fire. And if there was a sense of urgency, you didn't really see it in the video.
Yeah, well, and again, I don't know what all we've seen I don't know what all you can capture from the video as far as what the fire guys were doing, going around, whether or not at the back of the house or whatever action they were taking. But the truth is they really couldn't get out of their car because every time they tried, to even get their stuff fully on, every time they got out to even get the equipment, they were getting run back in the car. And I get it, when you say, well, I didn't see that dog being aggressive, or I don't feel like they were scared. The reality of I wasn't there. Mike Adkinson wasn't there. You weren't there. I had multiple members there who all said the same thing, who all consistently were concerned about it. And you can hear it in their voice. It's distasteful. It's bad. It's awful. And then, the comments are what they are. There's a penalty to be paid for it. So.
Shannon Lynn Capps, in talking about the audio, you said you didn't know about it right away, and that's understandable. But when you have the use of force, is it not protocol to then review all video?
No, nobody does that. Certainly not for that circumstance. You would look at the actual area itself. In other words, the immediate time that it happens and the use of force, and that's it. You don't go through and watch all the audios and all the videos for everything surrounding. So unless there's some compelling reason to do that, we wouldn't do that with any use of force. And by the way, just to be clear, because I'm sure somebody will question this, that is standard procedure anywhere in the United States of America. Nobody is going through hundreds of hours of video for that. So would have been great in this case. If you're asking me, would have been great in this case. I'd have loved to have known about that before, because we could have dealt with it before and not after the fact.
Abigail Jones wants to know if it's policy that cops follow fire department around. In this case, if you watch the dash cam,
he called for it. They actually called. Yeah.
Sergeant Hutto is parked down the street.
Yeah.
And once you hear that request come over the radio, that's when he responds. And typically, if there is a fire, there are deputies and
just about always there.
A lot of people asking if there is protocol that allows firefighters to use the water. Is there some sort of policy?
I think if they had got out and gotten the water on it, that's what I would have done. I think that's what they would have done too, as well, quite frankly. If they could have got out and got hooked up and got it going. But as I understand it, every time they got out, they were keep in mind, it's not a dog, it's just two dogs. And two dogs running together act a little bit differently. Anybody's ever seen that would know what I'm talking about. But I think if they could have got out and got the water on it and got them, I think that certainly would have been an option. The other option that we're thinking about for the future is things like a shield. We don't provide that to firefighters, but maybe that's something we should be doing in the future, looking at what's the option there. Anytime you deal with an animal, particularly if you're dealing with more than one animal, you got to figure out what's the best way to try and mitigate as much harm as possible, right? What equipment would work best? So,
Joey LaSalle, is it policy of WCSO to hire and retain employees that don't represent the values and culture of the agency?
So Joey LaSalle, that's actually like a rhetorical question, right? That's where you're asking me something to elicit a response. You already know the answer to the question before you ask it. Certainly, we're not going to tolerate it. We have to discipline. But I also have the equal responsibility of being fair and just to the best of my ability, and to be even tempered to the best of my ability. So, for instance, I don't mitigate the fact that these men, in this case, 2 men, have also done very, very good things for this community over the years. So I can't just throw that out tomorrow and say, because you were terse and because you were unprofessional this time in your language, which, let's be honest for a second, they thought no one would ever hear, does not make it okay. But I'm not going to forget everything they've ever done because of a private conversation that they let get public. They'll be held accountable. They were, and it is going to affect them. It's going to have an effect. But I can't let anger make decisions that are not in balance with what they actually did. Believe me, it would be easier. The really political, the easy thing for me to do is jump up and down and fire everybody involved and run off. It'd be easy. It'd be political, but it's not right. And so, we're going to do what's right, even when it stings. So,
Michael on YouTube, what additional equipment should patrol units be equipped with as alternatives to taser?
That's a great question. One of the things that I think that if you know that you're going to be dealing with, there are very large cans that we use in the jail of things like pepper spray. So that's something in the future that we may start talking about. Maybe it even needs to be on a fire truck, quite frankly. I mean, there may be some protocol for that to make sense. We don't want to go around just spraying people's dogs, but at the same time, nobody ever thinks their dog will bite, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. But I think maybe that's an answer, which is one of these large clear-out cans. That may be what we need to start looking at doing to try and equip that. So we're going to take a look and see what options we can do and do better. On individuals, a catch pole may work. A catch pole may work. But remember, when you catch a dog, you got to do something with it.
Why did the officer attempt to shoot the second dog as it ran away and wasn't near it?
Yeah, I don't think there was a good reason to do that. The second one, if I'm being honest with you, I know what he may have been thinking, but I disagree with the logic involved with it.
The questions that we've addressed, we're going to try to address some of the new ones that you guys have if there's any clarification.
If it's something different, I mean, you can go back and watch the first part of it. We've actually had a lot of other stuff going on as well, too, that we want to touch on as well. But go back and listen to it. If we didn't answer it, if it's something different than what we have, again, nothing about it's going to make it pleasant or make it good. It just has to be dealt with. So, what you got, Courtney?
Do firefighters wear body cameras?
No, and you don't want fire cameras. And so there was some discussion about doing that a few years ago, but the problem is, keep in mind, we deal with people at times that are traffic crash victims, somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother, somebody's grandfather, and a very, it's not uncommon for us to have to cut the clothes off people, for our staff to have to do that. And what's happened with body cameras, they get to be a sport, right? So you get to watch body cameras like they're a sport. But you're also removed from the danger in the sport. You're removed from what's actually going on. You don't have a sense of the confusion, the hectic part of it, what is and is not risk. It's like somebody said, well, I didn't see the risk. You're right. You didn't see it because you weren't standing there. And that's one of the things we've seen with cameras. They're a very useful tool, but it's got to be a balanced tool. And so I also don't think that somebody's suffering should become somebody else's entertainment. Just never have it like that.
So were the fire trucks inside the fenced-in portion? Why could they not access the hose if the dogs were inside a fence?
The dogs weren't inside the fence. You actually can see them at the fire truck. Yeah.
Shortly after the shooting takes place, you see the firefighters start getting the hose, and they're crossing into the gate.
Correct.
Onto the property.
Correct.
That happens about 2 minutes after the shooting, as they're dragging the hoses. And once that hose is charged, you see it. Charged with water, you see it get thicker. In Walton County, does a warrant have to be signed by a judge or a sheriff?
Yes, a warrant must be signed by a judge of competent jurisdiction in any county in the state of Florida. It's either a county judge or a circuit judge here in Florida. a probable cause arrest affidavit, which a lot of people may confuse as a warrant. One of my deputies can do that, just like a police officer can under certain circumstances. Probable cause has to exist to do it, but an actual warrant must be signed by a judge.
Somebody was asking in the, they're saying about the discipline, why not be more specific in what they were, how they were disciplined?
So a couple of things. I mean, one, I want to balance between people may not understand, and I'll walk through what some of the discipline is. So in this case, you're talking about things that affect their monetary, how much money they make. You're talking about job assignments, being reassigned. You're talking about the inability to be promoted. You know, and I hate to say it like this, but, you know, because of this, I will touch it. 6 months from now, when you are not thinking about this particular incident, because a lot of things are going to happen between now and then, and it's time to, you know, try to move on with somebody's career, this still has an effect on them, and that's just the absolute reality of it. So whether they go through things like, in this case, we were talking about this before, which is like counseling for the way they acted, for the conduct, for the way they do it, because it does affect parents' trust. You know, it's not there just to continue to humiliate people and to, you know, again and again, and to put public pictures up. This was a mistake, and they're going to be, and they are being dealt with about it. And then the other part of it is there's still some of it kind of going through the system. So you start losing job assignments, you start losing your ability to be promoted, you start having to do some of these things, and it's a financial impact. That's a pretty heavy penalty for a conversation you thought was in private. But the impact of what you did impacts this entire county, impacts the men and women's organization. So it's just the way it has to be. What else you got, Corey?
Is it not true when an officer's gun is used that there is an internal investigation?
Yeah, there's always a use of force. That's correct. Mm-hmm. And so one was done on this one originally, yes.
After hearing what you heard, how can you justify keeping the deputies during the election, saying that you would rather hire integrity and work short-staffed and have less?
Absolutely. You know, so I'm glad you brought this up, because ethics is what you do when nobody's looking, and integrity is what you do when everybody's looking, right? So the easy political thing was, to me, make myself look good and to fire these guys and say, look how tough and mean I am and all that. The truth is they have a body of work, and the penalty has to match, has to at least be somewhat in line with what happened here. You have to understand the easy thing is for me to walk in there and terminate these guys. That would have been the easy. You would have been happy, and you would have said, wow, the sheriff did the right thing. Actually did the thing that sheriff did, the thing that made me happy. What I wouldn't have been doing is the right thing. The tough thing here is not to terminate, because that's the thing that feels good. And very similar when you talk about, you've probably heard somebody's mother say it, if it feels good when you say it, you probably shouldn't say it, right? So I feel very good from an integrity standpoint the way this was handled, because I think it was fair, it was harsh, it was appropriate, but it's the right thing. And that's what I'm charged with doing. Not just because a mass plurality wants something like that.
A lot of questions being asked that are similar in nature.
Right.
And that's for one of them is about our policy and how large our budget is. Are deputies not properly trained how to use their equipment? You know, you and I have talked about that over the last week.
They're properly trained to use equipment. That's just somebody trying to that doesn't like me personally, and they're confusing a couple of different things. Let's stay on task. The task here is this is a hard thing, and it is what it is. But don't mistake that with, they're not trained or some version of that. That's ludicrous.
What policy is there for deputies being able to turn their body cameras off and on?
So actually, in this case, they could have, per policy, after the shoot was over, actually turned their body cameras off. They didn't, which is how we became aware of it. So essentially, when they're not engaging with the public after the call, body cameras can be turned off. But in this case, they didn't. I guarantee you, he thought he muted that body camera. He did not.
There is some a question about sworn statements from those involved, those who said that they were pinned, etc., from the fireside, which is not on camera on video when the deputy arrives. What happened prior to that? Is there reports, statements, that sort of thing?
Yeah, they talk to those folks. I don't know how many. We don't normally have somebody write a sworn statement because saying, for instance, that an animal pinned me in or this or that happened. It's not a criminal. That's not a criminal investigation. Does that make sense? So we don't normally go around and try to take sworn statements from those kind of things. They just talk to them and find out. You know.
There are like fire incident reports.
Yeah, there's reports. There's obviously audio from those things, but we don't go into a sworn statement for stuff like that, and we never have. That's not consistent with. It's kind of what we're doing is kind of uniformly consistent with what's done in best practices.
I'm going to. I don't think that there's anything that we haven't covered as far as this is concerned. Obviously, people are they're passionate about how they feel about it.
Sure,
and they're upset.
I feel the same way.
And the comments are of frustration for a lot of people because they're asking, like, how can you feel good about keeping these deputies patrolling?
Did something in my words say that I felt good about it? I don't think that's what I said. What I said is I have a responsibility to be appropriate. Yeah. And truthfully, for some people, firing wouldn't be good enough for them. There's some people that would want more than that. And, I have to be balanced about this. We as an organization have to be balanced. That's true of any professional organization in the United States. So we cannot just walk in and fire folks like that. That's not the way this works. And by the way, it's not the way it works in any professional organization. Okay. You cannot forget everything else that somebody has done over that conversation. So,
Jenny Gamillion, Sheriff Adkinson, I'm concerned about the migrant crisis and the possibility of an influx of illegals, like what has happened in Springfield, Ohio, and other locations, Coffee County, et cetera. Right. Coffee County actually held a public meeting this Thursday to address these issues. Please advise how you plan to handle a situation that could include dropping off thousands of undocumented individuals in our local area.
So we've actually had, unfortunately, we were talking about this before we got on air. We're having a lot of struggles here the last few weeks. Many of you may be aware that there were several different traffic accidents this week. One I referenced before at here at the restaurant at 331 and Chat Holly, which is being investigated by the Highway Patrol. We also had another incident involving someone here in the country illegally that fled after a traffic accident around Ramsey Branch in Freeport. I'll just be very honest with you, Ms. Goldman. We have looked, I think the last 10 people that we arrested that were booked in the Walton County Jail that were here illegally and committed a crime. So I need you to understand that's two separate things. Here illegally and committed a crime. We notify Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They are not responding to us in a timely manner. If they do not respond to us and they do not tell us to detain them, I am compelled by law to release them. So in this last weekend, we had a stabbing incident where 2 people were stabbed. We had to release those folks because there was no response back to us. We had an aggravated child abuse case, also with someone here in the country illegally. We had to release that individual back into the community. Why? Because they were issued a bond by a judge here in Walton County, which is what they were supposed to do, issue them a bond. When we notified Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they did not respond in a timely manner. I do not have the legal authority, no sheriff, no police chief in the United States of America has a legal authority to detain them if we are not told to do that. So it is a problem. This is getting to be a real serious problem, a real serious issue. And I know everybody talks about what's going on in Springfield. It's problematic here in this county as well, too. Because if they responded to us a day later and said, hold them, it's too late. They're already out. So what does all that mean? It means that we as a body here in Walton County, we need to be really pressuring our congressional and Senate folks saying we've got to have some relief, because this is becoming a major impact here. I think at 100 people we looked at, the last 100, I did this last year, we looked at 100 people that were in the country illegally that we arrested and booked in the Walton County Jail. I think only 10 of them were actually detained out of all of those people. So all of those folks are released back to the community. And I know many of you get frustrated with us about it, but that is in fact the law. I do not have the ability to detain them after the fact. Tony, you're a former Border Patrol agent. Am I saying anything incorrect here? So Deputy Bianco, just for those of you who don't know, it had a long distinguished career with the Border Patrol, and he and I talk about this off camera before. But am I missing anything, Tony, with the way I say this?
No, it's correct that as a sheriff's deputy, we do not have the authority to even make an arrest for someone being here illegally. Yeah. We do not have the proper authority to determine alienage, whether it be or lack of alienage if they derive citizenship through whatever means are legal means. So with that being said, the ICE is the investigative branch of the immigration system, and the enforcement branch is the U.S. Border Patrol.
Correct.
There is a Border Patrol station in Pensacola, but they are pretty much marine related. They take care of the water, and the closest Border Patrol station in terms of for land is probably in the Keys.
Yeah. Wow. So, and Ms. Gomez, just to go back to that point, it's very frustrating to us too. It is an issue. I will tell you what we do. We do participate in the retaking, or excuse me, the holding and housing of these folks, and we notify everybody involved in immigration and customs enforcement when we get these folks. So we're doing our part. We're doing what I legally can do, which is as soon as we take them into custody, we say, hey, this person may be here in this country illegally. They have committed a crime. Will you come get them? Some places don't even do that. We try to do that. In fact, all 67 sheriff's offices in Florida actually do that. But I can't hold them. I can tell you that it was a sheriff that paid several $1 million for holding someone without that detainer. They held them for like 42, 48 hours afterwards. And it cost several $1 million. So this is a problem. Yes, I'm concerned about the migrant crisis, bottom line.
Michael from Facebook asked, do you think FDLE should conduct training on how to deal with aggressive animals? Do we go through training on how to deal with aggressive animals?
Yeah, I think that's probably best handled at the local level, or to have somebody like FDLE put a core competency group across the a state to try and find different best practices. And I think every situation is different. You don't always have multiple animals, which is a little bit of the issue here too, which you have actually 2 dogs as opposed to 1. In my 30-something years of being around and being involved, I don't know that I've ever saw any really good training from that. We've used different things, and some work better than others. I think if you have time, that certainly makes a difference. I've been bitten. We were talking about this before. I've been bitten trying to conduct an investigation years ago. These things do happen. But I don't think there's ever anything wrong with trying to find a better way to do it. So, yeah, I don't disagree with you.
I think you may have addressed this, but obviously, there's a lot of questions. And again, just trying to go through maybe some of the ones we haven't answered. Did you already address, at the back end of this discipline, they'll have to go to counseling or get us? Some people are asking about sensitivity training or psych evals.
Yeah, that's so part of our mental health program, and I say that just because I think that's a very positive thing. We even have in our organization we call it an early warning, which is if you have complaints because of rudeness and things of that nature, if we get to a certain point, you have to have mandatory counseling. Now, we already have counseling that's in place, but in situations like this, there has to be some follow-up. There has to be some training and some follow-up with it. And to understand the impact that this is having. Look, think about this for a second. I'm sitting here on a Monday night answering questions about this, right? So the easiest thing would have been me to find a reason to not come on here tonight. But we're not going to do that. We're not going to run. We knew this was needed to be addressed, and it wasn't handled correctly. And so, if I'm sitting here taking from you your anger, from you the public, you can, and rightfully so. By the way, I'm not saying that. You can bet that there's going to be some corrective procedure at the organization. So think about that for a minute.
Mark wants to know, was one of the deputies involved in FTO, and will he retain that position?
Yes, he was, and no, he will not.
Was there anyone on scene that's come forward stating they feared the dogs also and agree they needed to be killed?
Yeah, there was a couple. Yes, there were multiple firefighters there on scene that were concerned. Yes.
And just my apologies ahead of time. Like I said, obviously there's a lot of questions, and they're coming in very quickly in the live feed. So just bear with me as I try to choose some of the ones that haven't been addressed. That's not an intentional part of it. Let's talk first about Brendan Souter. We're going to switch gears a little bit just because I want that news to be out there for those that have not seen it.
Yep.
That is an arrest that's happened recently.
Correct.
And he is a resident of this county.
Correct.
And we arrested him after a report came into our agency. And that happened very quickly.
Which was a sexual battery on a child. Sauter had a long military career. Prior to retiring, then moved into competitive shooting, had a firing range in North Walton County, and lived here in Freeport. Obviously, given his what he is accused of doing and what his background is, we had a lot of concern for people's safety. So a decision was made after the investigators, who moved really quickly on this to be able to find enough probable cause to make an arrest, to go ahead and, after serving a search warrant, arrest Sauter as he returned back to the state. We asked members of the U.S. Marshals Task Force to do that, and he was taken into custody over in Pensacola. Had to surrender his passport. He is out on GPS monitoring. We don't always get that GPS monitoring, but in this case, we were able to have that happen, which we think was very much warranted. And this case will move forward, and obviously it's an ongoing investigation, so I don't want to get too far down the line on that. But there have been a lot of interest in that case as well too. Just real briefly, because we are asked about it, and unfortunately, from our standpoint, this came up publicly when it should not have. Some things should come to the public, and some things shouldn't immediately. In regard to the death at Sacred Heart Hospital, it was erroneously reported that there was going to be an arrest imminent. Criminal charges were pending. That is not accurate. We have been contacted by the medical examiner office, Dr. Oleski. We are speaking with her and her staff, and do as is appropriate due diligence in regard to that case. No one should infer anything more or less than that at this point. It may not be something that falls under our purview and jurisdiction, but we do have an obligation to go through and do the appropriate due diligence. It's obviously, that's an incident that has received national attention, and we certainly would have liked to have been able to conduct that in a more private manner till we determine whether or not it is in fact a criminal issue or whether that should be entirely handled by the medical board. Either way, that is going to be resolved from our standpoint, hopefully in a reasonable time frame. But we hate that came out, and certainly our sympathy is with that family there. It's a tragedy, for sure.
Molly Garrett, per policy, why can deputies ever turn their cameras off?
Well, so think about it this way, Ms. Garrett. If maybe you're having a rough night, right? And so we're at your house just because we knock on the wrong door, and you come to your door, and maybe you've had an argument with your significant other or your children, or maybe you've had a little bit drink, and whatever, you are in your home, right? We don't think that every moment of every day should be recorded for other people's enjoyment. So, for instance, just say again that I went to your house and I had my camera on. I'm not even supposed to be there. Maybe you come out in your nightgown, you answer the door. Well, your neighbor knows there's a deputy there. Now he says, "Oh, I want to see what was going on there. Let me watch that. Let me put that on YouTube. Let me see what the inside of your house looks like." We also have found that many people do not like to come forward when they know they're being audioed and videoed. And so the reason we do it, you have a reasonable expectation of privacy. You have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So I don't think that every incident should be audio and video recorded. Think about this, every time, if you worked at a job 24/7, when you're not on a call, should audio video calls be on? Probably not. They shouldn't be on. You're talking to you're on the phone, you talk to your significant other, whatever it is. It should be in the time you're engaged with the public. That's when those cameras should be on. It should not be, again, for voyeurism, just so people can watch everything. And I have to tell you, there are tens of thousands of hours of video, tens of thousands of hours. And that's with us not running them 24/7. So I'm not familiar. Some agencies may run it 24/7. I'm not familiar anybody doing that because it's typically, if you're not on a call, I've never heard of somebody running it without. Corey, have you ever heard of that before?
I have.
Have you ever? I don't think I've ever heard of that before. So no, we don't.
Your storage.
Yeah, well, the storage now is already unbelievable. Terabytes, petabytes worth of storage. So, hope that answers your question.
Why are we deciding to do a Sheriff Live on a Monday? Why is that? Why have we suddenly changed the day we're doing it?
Well, first of all, how about we start with, we have a Sheriff Live. That's kind of pretty cool when we're the only place in the nation that does it. So maybe instead of saying, why you do it on a Monday, why don't you say, hey, that's pretty cool that you did it, even though you knew you were fixing to have a tough night here. And next week we may do it on a Wednesday.
To be fair, I posted that before this came out. So
yeah,
I
but
didn't know.
my point about that is, I'm not sure what the point is of that comment, why do it on a Monday. We maybe do it on Tuesday. There's actually a pretty good reason. I'm just not going to share it with you this week, so part of it's, I will share whatever it is. So it's my 30th wedding anniversary this week. So no, I decided that we probably wasn't going to do it at this point, but anyway, such is life. We didn't do it last week either. Maybe we should have done it last week. Certainly been better in retrospect. Not trying to be flippant, but that's a little bit of a silly question, right?
What's your plan to rebuild public trust? We talk about that a lot.
Yeah,
that was a specific question.
That's actually a really good question. It's a really good question. So, one of the things you do is you have to keep doing what you're doing, what you should already be doing, but do it again and again and again, right? We were talking about this before. It takes 10 attaboys to make up for one uh-oh. The truth is, our vast majority of our staff goes to work every day, and they're very concerned about the well-being of the people they serve. And the way you do it is you just put your nose to the grindstone and you just keep doing what you were already doing. Listen, just send a message to everybody in there. There are ramifications inside the organization for what happened. That's just the truth of it. But to rebuild trust, you have to keep doing what you're doing, not hide from it, and go on and try and be better. It's the bottom line. Because I don't think I'm never a fan of and I'll say this, I'm never a fan of some sweeping policy change or some political response to something. You just got to keep doing the right thing and just write it out. Write it out.
I think I asked this question. Typically after any deputy involved shooting, let's just say use of force with a firearm, are they immediately taken off the road? Are they immediately
not involving unless a human being is killed? No. And now let me put a caveat to that. There are times that because of some psychological things that need to be done, some counselor will check on the well-being and of our staff. There are times that we do that, but otherwise, no.
It says somebody is asking why we're dodging public records requests on the Tracy Vaz Bradley lawsuit. It's been over a month. You have not turned them over. That question is from Peter Dragon.
I'm literally hearing the public answering questions pretty much every couple of times a week, live questions, right? And we honor public records requests, and those documents have been out there pretty good. And I think the fact that, you know, in that case, he was acquitted out of 7 out of 8. And on the one charge, they gave $0, which under Florida law means that the plaintiff is then responsible for potentially paying the defendant's legal fees. Tells you everything you should know about the merit of that case. But you certainly will get a copy of those records, Mr. What was the name?
The question was asked by Peter Dragon.
Okay. Yeah, so they'll absolutely. But those records have been given out so many times. They're public for the most part. I think almost you can pull them off the clerk of court, by the way. It'd take you about 5 minutes to do that.
Irene Soper, how can we be assured this dog shooting or something like this doesn't happen at our house? How can they protect their dogs?
Yeah, so you know what? That's actually a really good question. Because I was thinking about this with my own dog as well too, right? Because like I said, I have one of those breeds that when you look at him, he looks a certain way, right? And he would be aggressive if you came to our home. So one of the things we like to try and do is, and I know South Walton Fire has a program of this as well, where you call us and register, let us know that dog is there at that address, and then we can simultaneously dispatch animal control. So they get there at the same time. That's actually one of the most important things you could do is let us know the animal is there before, so you can call. We were talking about, we do handle with care for children, but I don't think we have included that with the pets. That may be something that comes out of this in and of itself, is the opportunity to register where that you have a pet and put it in our dispatch. So I'm going to make a note of that. That's actually a really, really good idea, is to be able to do something like that so that we know before we get there that there's animal there, and that animal potentially could be defensive.
I know at Walton County Animal Shelter, they have created stickers that you can put on your home that indicate how many pets you have inside.
But it would be great to know before we got there. That's actually an opportunity. You actually triggered an opportunity to be better. That's really a good chance to be better, is to maybe start a policy where a public relations program where you say, look, if you have these animals, you know, there, and you want us to know, go ahead and tell us. Let's register the dog being there. By the way, it also includes other animals as well, just because, you know, in that case, even if a dog had been in the house, somebody would have been looking for them, right? Or a cat, or whatever the situation may be. So that's actually there's an opportunity to be better.
Angela Sears, it's very concerning that these illegals committing crimes are being released over and over. What is being done to help prevent that?
I wish, Ms. Sears, I wish I could tell you that I had an answer to that. I honestly do not have an answer. It's extremely frustrating. When we realized that when we realized that so many of these folks are not being picked up, and I want to be 100% clear. We're not suggesting that you go out and try and find everybody who's in the country illegally and round them up, put them up. But that is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, people have committed another criminal violation and have been booked in the Walton County Jail. To me, those people should be immediately deported. That is where the problem with illegal immigration in this country, and you know, a lot smarter people than me are working on this, I know. But a couple of things really make sense to me. One of them is to immediately close and secure the border, right? So you got to start that first. And then the second thing is anybody who has been arrested for a new crime should be deported. First and foremost, not released from jail. You know, we have people that are in prison, state prison, that get out of state prison, they're not being deported. So you need to understand that. Those people should be deported, and if they have a previous deportation order and or previous violence offense from their country of origin, we should get those people deported first, and that is the answer. Go back to your original question. I think that starts with writing Representative Dunn, Representative Gates, Senator Rick Scott and Senator Marco Rubio. And I know they all feel really strongly about this, but I think it's important for them to hear from you to say that. I have said this to them. We've had these conversations, but you're their bosses too. So, I mean, I would reach out and tell you to write. You know, people don't do that much anymore, but take the time to write a letter, send an email, make a call. It does matter. People need to hear this.
Sheriff, how many complaints against an officer or deputy would trigger a mandate to counseling or mental health help? Is there a
Yes. So essentially, what happens is, and I don't have it sitting right in front of me, but essentially, if you have what we'll call the same complaint, for instance, like rudeness or inappropriate behavior, some version of that. If you have more than a complaint by more than one individual inside of a year, it triggers this what's called an early warning system. So that, in other words, if I stopping somebody on a roadway and I stop you and Corey and you say, man, he was really nasty to me, he was rude to me, super blah, blah, blah. And then 8-9 months later, I stop Tony and Tony says, wow, he was really out of hand, he was nasty, he yelled at me. Well, that's two separate people saying it at different times. That tells us, hey, look, we're not saying the deputy did anything wrong. We're not saying you're right or wrong, but we're saying we need to sit down and see if there's something else going on here. Is there some other issue? And so that triggers a referral for a review. And I think that's a perfectly good system. I think it's fair. It's not a disciplinary mark per se. Now, we don't always do it if it's the same person, right? So, for instance, Corey doesn't like Mike Adkinson, so she consistently calls and complaints on me. Well, that's a little bit different animal, right? This has to be independent and separate of each other and in a certain time frame.
is when a use of force happens, is a deputy carrying a gun before he goes through counseling afterwards?
It's a deputy. The only use of force that would predicate someone's firearm, I shouldn't say the only, to remove somebody's firearm from them, something serious, that even in an officer-involved shooting where a human being is shot, we don't take their firearm from them. And I shouldn't take it back. We take the firearm to make sure there's nothing wrong with the firearm, but they're given another firearm. We don't take people's guns away from them unless there's an imminent threat to themselves or others, right? That becomes a little bit different. That's, and really at that point you're put on leave. You cannot perform your duties as a deputy sheriff. So we don't, use of force doesn't mean you take somebody's gun or their badge or their car or anything like that. So.
Another question is, what does your policy state about dealing with aggressive dogs? Do we have a policy on dealing with aggressive dogs?
No, I mean there's not a specific policy that says you have an aggressive dog, you have an aggressive whatever type of animal. You can't. At the end of the day, you can't policy things to death. In other words, I'll never write a policy that'll cover every situation. In our general standard operating procedure, remember you have a policy, which is an overarching school of the way you do things. That's your big broad picture, and then you have standard operating procedures. Our standard operating procedures we typically call animal control for certain things, right? If we have time. Time is always the mitigating factor, time and risk. If you have time and there's no risk, then you've got time for animal control. If you don't have time and there's no risk, then it becomes different. Hopefully that makes sense.
Todd Rourke, when are you going to investigate the environmental crime of water dumping through straight pipes reported to you by Alan Osborne over a month ago? Recent storms filled those pipes to capacity.
Mr. Rourke, are you under the impression it's not being investigated? That's actually incorrect. In fact, I think you'd even talk to Mr. Osborne if you're friends, then he can tell you that himself, because he did in fact come in for an interview the other day. So,
going back to Brendan Souter, Sandra Majeski is asking if we have a contract with Sauter's business. That's actually a misconception.
We do not. We do not have the short answer is no, we do not have a business with Brandon Sauter's business. We do stuff with Stronghold, which is Brendan Graves sometimes. So sometimes we do some business with those folks, different people, completely unrelated. by the way, let me just a moment of kind of pride for those guys at Stronghold. They just they were just awarded by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Stronghold was this opportunity to be the one of the chief law enforcement training places in the state of Florida in regard to some active shooter stuff, which is incredible. And the fact that a Walton County business got that is really, really good. So congratulations to Brandon Graves, John Roby, those guys out at Stronghold, just quality work they do. And we're really blessed to have that in our backyard. They're good partners with the Walton County Sheriff's Office and provide us a lot of assistance as well. So can't say enough about them.
But they are not associated with
No, they're
Brendan
not
Souter.
No,
Just
they're
to, again, clarify, because I know that there's a couple questions regarding this.
Different animals.
Kimberly Thrasher wants to know, why didn't y'all investigate my dad's murder that occurred 9 months ago?
I'm not familiar with any murder that's not been investigated. You have to reach out to us offline and tell us what you're referring to and what's going on with that, so I can look into that. But I am not familiar with any homicide whatsoever that's not been investigated.
And I think we addressed this earlier. A lot of people are logging on. Have these deputies spoken with Mr. Pylon since all of this audio came out?
No.
I'm just trying to catch up. Again, we've addressed a lot of the Mixon Road incident with the dog earlier on. So I want to...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Blaine Stapp is asking on Facebook if you would tell everyone about the hospital opening up.
Yeah, so the hospital the new hospital is now going to be open, I think officially on Wednesday is where we're at. Is that correct, Corey? Am I saying that correct? Wednesday?
Yes, sir, I believe.
Yeah, Wednesday. And listen, that is a game changer for the people in North Walton County to have that level of care. Everything from some robotics to, being able to perform surgeries on site there. Super excited about what's going on there. And I think we looked at it one time. We were transporting, a couple of hundred folks, obviously a few hundred folks every month. Now that they have this option of being able to go to North Walton Doctors Medical, but here our Doctors Hospital. Here's what's interesting about that, and some of you may find this. We looked at our ambulance transports north of the bay. Defuniak Springs and Freeport. Freeport's just a little bit bigger than Defuniak right now today. There is in Defuniak twice the number of ambulance transports a month there is in Freeport. So say, for instance, there's 200 a month transports in Defuniak. There's only 100 a month in Freeport. That's an incredible statistic. I mean, when you think about what you're talking about with the ambulances running back and forth. And so the short answer is why? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them has to do with, age and demographics of the people living in Freeport right now. The other has to do with proximity to the hospital. And so when people are closer, sometimes they have the opportunity to take themselves to a couple of different hospitals. But I'm telling you, this is going to make a difference and save lives in North Walton area. And we're super, super pleased that they're open. And, options are always better. They got quality medical care there. And that thing is basically a brand new hospital. So we're excited about that.
Dan Curry wants to know, he's setting up community meetings with Lieutenant Smith. Would you be willing to come to a few of those with him? Yeah, I always try and go to, if what's funny about that is, the short answer is yes. But what's interesting, we did community meetings for years. And what we found was we have better luck at homeowners association meetings. And that's actually the reason, Mr. Curry, that's actually the reason we started this. It's because we were holding community meetings across the county, everywhere from Paxton to Gaskin to Choctaw Beach, and we really struggled getting people because what we found was they're working and they have these other places that they need to be, and sometimes they didn't have time to go. We found this has been very effective for us. But sure, if you put them on the agenda and let us know, I always like to try and do those things. I think it's a good event.
you may find that you have better luck at working with individual homeowner associations. We found Next Door to be pretty successful. I think Corey and Lindsay as far as reaching out to people and getting them in there and getting them involved. But yeah, we'd love to do that. Love to be a part of it.
I'm following up on some questions that'll inevitably come later.
Yep. I'm sitting here looking at a list of stuff we've got. That's why you're seeing me look off screen. We've got a list of stuff we're supposed to be also touching on as well too. So,
Justin Hawley wants to know, with illegals not being detained due to federal responsiveness, is there a level to the severity of crimes where they must be detained or held?
Only yes, but only because of the state's requirement here. So let me give you an example. If you commit an aggravated battery, the judge in any court of competent jurisdiction will set a bond. And so if the bond is $50,000, right, you will be held in jail until such time as you meet that bond. Now, you may go to a bondsman and then put up $5,000 as collateral, and you can bond out. As soon as you can make the bonds, you are allowed by law to bond out. That's the way the law works. There are occasions that they don't initially set a bond, like murder, for instance, or that the bond is so high that you're not going to make it. So if you get $1 million bond, you have to have $100,000 in liquid cash to be able to get out. And many times they'll start with no bond and then move from there. Like a violation of probation typically has a no bond until such time as you see a judge. So if you get arrested for something tonight and you're here illegally and it's a felony, you cannot bond out. You won't get a bond until you see a judge the next day, right? Unless a bond has previously been set for the charge. So, yeah, it just really depends. I mean, the more serious charges, and that's the ones that ICE tends to come get. Something super serious, we'd call somebody at home and wake them up. If it came down to that with ICE, say, look, come get this person. But that's definitely not everyone. That's 10 out of every 100 is meeting that criteria for them to come get. So, I by the way, I understand how disheartening this is. I know how frustrating it is. People don't like that. I don't like it, but it's not something that the sheriff's office in any county, anywhere in the United States of America, has no say in this. This is a federal matter entirely. So,
Gina on Facebook wants to know if we have missing people in the county, any cold cases, etc.
Yeah, we unfortunately we do. We have several that we are sitting in line, just trying to go through periodically, seeing where they're at. A lot of times what happens with missing people is they turn up in other places or people forget to notify us, but we have several that we think are under suspicious circumstances. And those cases are treated like homicide cases, so you work as far as you can and you're constantly waiting for something new to come up on them. As far as old homicide cases, we have a handful of those as well too. One of our investigators, Steve Sunday, who retired a few years ago, Steve came back and he is working strictly cold case homicides for us now. Steve puts in quite a bit of work for us trying to do that. In fact, he recently was featured on a couple of different, Corey, what was the name of the two programs? I know that
the Deck Podcast.
The Deck Podcast, which is...
it's basically a spinoff of Crime Junkie.
Right.
And FSA just did a podcast on the Bobby Jones homicide from the 50s.
Well, 1972. 72. Bobby Ray Jones, it was from 1972. But we have several that got quite a bit of years on. But, look, the answer is out there.
Coming up on the 50th anniversary.
Coming up on the 50th anniversary,
I think 50 was what stuck out.
Yes, unfortunately, we have several. And what happens with missing is we try to periodically go back through them. And even with the runaways, when you have a runaway, we're required by law, we do within 1 hour, we have to report to what's called a child is missing. FDLE monitors that, and we try to immediately, once we know a child is missing, make sure that report's filed and that we start moving forward. So, speaking of which, can we touch on some children's stuff real quick because it's important? As we started back to school this year, and unfortunately, in lieu of the terrible murders in Georgia, with the 14-year-old student opening fire on his classmates and killing killing classmates there in Georgia. I do not know what the reason for this is, but we tend to, across the state, there is this spin up of people making threats. There is also a spin up of people reporting stuff that is not really a threat, right? But then on top of it, what you also have is rumors. So rumors really grow exponentially. And a lot of these are reported through the Fortify Florida app. And we're lucky in Walton County because we have a very strong relationship with Walton County School District, and Charlie Morris, who's head of their school security there, really works well with us. And, I just say this because I received calls from parents multiple times this week with concerns about things maybe they had heard. And listen, the good thing about it is it was stuff that Mr. Morris's staff or our SRDs had already jumped on it, had already taken care of it and looked at it. None of them had any merit to them. None of them had any merit to it. And many times it was second and third hand information. We're just bound to make sure we don't get to be wrong about this, right? We have an obligation to follow it out, to follow all the way through it. So we do that, and I want you to know how seriously we take that and how close that relationship is with the security folks there. I authorize Guardian program here. Mr. Hughes agreed to do that, and so we have really good guardians in Walton County as well to go with our SRDs, which is it's really a plus. And I think that's a great example of when two entities have the same common goal, that it makes a difference. So,
Katie Shamel on Facebook, what was the cause of the crash into the restaurant earlier? I think it was late last week. I think it was Friday.
So it was someone turning off a Chat Holly Road onto 331 going northbound, trying to make a U-turn, coming all the way back through, jumping the median, through the fence and into the side of the building. So that's investigated by the Highway Patrol, and they will draw medical blood. And from there, they'll make a decision whether or not that person was under the influence. Spoiler alert, I would be highly surprised if they were not. We actually did one on 30A, an accident that was the blood alcohol level on that individual was 3.33. That is
four times the legal limit.
4 times. Quite frankly, that's I don't even know how he was walking around. And thank God he didn't kill anyone, And so DUI is a serious business. And in the days of Uber and those types of things, and Sunshine Limo here and Lyft, there's just no excuse for it. There literally is no excuse for it. And so that stuff actually scares me. There's such heavy traffic here. If you saw it this last weekend, 20 in Freeport, even coming down 83 and up in North Walton, unbelievable traffic for it to be early September. So we just ask people to be careful because they're going to be more. I looked today, I had a meeting with our fire marshal, Jeremy Radney, and I think we looked at something in the neighborhood between Freeport and just Mossy Head on the books. We were anticipating something in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 6,000 new residences. That's unbelievable. That is a staggering number, and we're anticipating those inside of 5 years. So if it's half right, if half that number gets developed, you're talking about adding, give or take, 5,000 people to these communities. Traffic's bad on 20. It's about to get worse. The turning lane, and we get calls about this all the time, the turning lane from 331 going north onto 20, it backs up traffic every day. We're aware of it. DOT's aware of it. It's just very frustrating. Very frustrating.
Lori Derbyshire, Vandenveer, many reports on the retaliatory nature of WCSO, both within the organization and against private citizens. Please address this.
Rumor. Listen, again, that's kind of one of those I heard somebody who heard from somebody who heard from somebody, but no, not true.
Stephen Menchel, you are correct. The vast majority of men and women at WCSO are hardworking, and we thank them for what they do to keep us safe. In reference to the shooting incident, was anyone actually bit?
No, we actually thought that the fire chief was bit on the boot, but he did not get bit. And so, I'm sorry, the battalion chief, not the fire chief, because he was having to kick the dog to get it off of him. So, and that happened a couple of times, but no, he was not bit. So we were thankful for that.
Crystal Campbell, you know these deputies more personally than we do. Do you feel their actions line up with their real character as deputies?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think so. I don't think so. That's not, the problem with me saying that is someone will hear me say that and say, well, you're making excuses. And I just don't want to do that because the conduct needs to be addressed, and it is addressed. I tend to think that what happened is not a reflection. I have seen both of those deputies do some pretty honorable things. And I'm not going to talk about that now because right now this is what we're dealing with. I could tell you a couple of them that you, as the general public, would immediately recognize their involvement in, where you have lauded their behavior. You just didn't know it was them. So that's when I say it's important to balance that. So no, I don't think so. I think the truth of the matter is the first Sergeant Hutto, I think he was upset that he actually did it. And I think that was a inappropriate humor response based on something he didn't want to do. That's Mike Atkinson's speculation. He didn't want to do that, and he was making inappropriate humor about that. And I don't get to make excuses for that, but I think it's just important that we hold him accountable for the conduct. And so that's where we're at.
Mr. Dan Curry, in May, I believe you and Mr. Hughes asked at the BCC meeting and wanted to communicate more as one, BCC schools and SO. If you have not organized a first meeting, can we schedule one? I'd be willing to meet.
So yeah, that's actually, it was originally supposed to be with the Board of County Commissioners. The reason I waited, I reached out to a gentleman by the name of Tony Carvajal, who was with the, I believe it was with the Florida Association of Counties. The reason we waited is because I knew there was an election and it just seemed a little presumptuous. And, I didn't want to schedule a meeting and there might be changing county commissioners, there might be changing sheriff, might be a changing clerk of court, all these things. So I wanted the elections. I said, well, Mr. Hughes and I think both agreed, let's wait till the election's over. Elections are over now. We know who's sitting in these offices. So I'm going to reach out to Mr. Carvajal and try and schedule that. What I'll do is, Mr. Curry, if you want to email us and we can kind of coordinate some of that, but I think what we're going to do is probably reach out to Mr. Sunday and ask him to meet with each one of the commissioners as well as the other constitutional officers. Ms.
And talk
Skipper.
about what that, why
Yeah,
you
so
originally,
it
you
had to
wanted
be
a
with
continuity
strategic
of plan.
Yeah, a continuity plan, strategic planning. There doesn't exist an overall master plan for the county for the growth that's coming. We do that at the sheriff's office. School board does some of that. We have to be holistic, but it's important for the Board of County Commissioners or the tax collector or for us all to be aware of what we see coming down horizon-wide and what the long-term needs. So in my case, for instance, we were dealing, sheriff's office case, we were dealing with a radio project, which is a massive, $45+ million situation. But the truth of the matter is at some point, you're going to have to build a South Walton substation in the line. Probably not during my tenure, but it needs to be planned for now. At some point, you'll have to expand the jail. We are going to build a new fire station at Windswept this year, but at some point, we're going to need to start building one in Mossy Head now. You need to be planning on building in Mossy Head now. So, but it's great that I know it, but I need to make sure that Mr. Hughes knows it, and Ms. Skipper knows it, and Mr. Messer knows it, that all the entities are talking. So if you remember, what we discussed is doing this publicly, holding one in North Walton, up around the Paxton area, one in Central Walton, whether that's Defuniak, Freeport, and then one in South Walton. And we could hold it 4 times. But I wanted to wait. I think everybody kind of decided let's wait and see until after November so that we could do that. But if you want to, we need a point person. We need a point person on the board. So, whether that, Mr. Curry, if you have an interest in doing that, or if Mr. Sunday wants to do it, whatever. But we need to start moving forward. And getting everybody scheduled is difficult, but now is the time. It doesn't need to wait any longer.
Kara Rankin, she has another question. What started the fire on Mixon?
That's under investigation. Again, that home, I don't think the residents were there I know they weren't there at that time, and I think they were splitting time. That resident was also scheduled to be sold in a week and a half afterwards. So I'm just not sure. It could be a myriad of things. It just needs to be investigated. So the state fire marshal's office will do that and try and let us know what they decide. I don't know if it had gas in there or what. The explosions throw us off a little bit. We're not sure what set those explosions. You can actually hear that on one of the body cameras. But, yeah, there were at least 2 small explosions in there. So just not sure.
Talk about the process of. I'm not gonna read this question because there's profanity in it. But talk about the process of when we respond to house fires. How is notification made to the homeowners? Is it made by the fire department? Is it made by the deputies?
No, it's not typically. So again, remember, a lot of times you don't know who actually lives in the home, right? You don't know what there is. So we don't, a lot of times don't have their phone number before they're there. Many people don't own their property. Some do. Most people don't have their cell phone registered. So a lot of times there's a real delay, or can be a real delay, in a homeowner being found out because, again, if you go to somebody's home, until you look it up on the property appraiser's thing, how do you know who owns the property, right? So there's that. And a firefighter isn't typically going to stop and start looking at the property appraiser's office before they start trying to do something. So all that comes after the fact. You would never do it before. That doesn't even make sense, quite frankly.
Abigail Jones, you speak of privacy. Please share where the flock cameras are and how these devices don't violate privacy concerns.
So, actually, I don't like them. So there's that. But because they're in the public space, they're not in someone's home. They're not in someone's yard. So in the public right-of-way, the public square, the law is pretty specific about this. No different than any other business in the public square, you can use these cameras. Security, just like any other security camera, can be used in any of those spaces. But just so you know, I don't actually like it either. I do it. It makes me a little bit of a hypocrite. I do it because it's incredibly effective and it's saving lives and it's solving crimes, and there's zero question about that. The jury's not even out on that. It works. I don't particularly like it, but I don't like body cameras running all the time, and I don't like. I just believe in people's basic right to privacy. However, in the public space, the public's been pretty overwhelming about this, that this works and that it's acceptable. So,
Randy said you should check the speed of your assistant fire chief about 9 o'clock this morning, going through a construction zone with workers present, turning into Chick-fil-A. Not sure if you've been made aware.
No, I wouldn't be made aware of any particular situation like that, but we can certainly take a look at it. We keep GPS on those vehicles for a reason.
Todd Rourke, why are select commissioners and employees allowed to carry a weapon inside government buildings, and specifically during public meetings? The general public is prohibited and scanned. These men and women are never processed via the scan.
Short version is they're not. I do not provide an exception for a commissioner to carry a firearm into a public meeting. Short version.
Abigail Jones, how soon after discharging a weapon does a use of force report need to be filed?
It's typically done by the end of a shift. So it could be hours. Like, just depends when the shift ends, but typically you're expected to have it done by the end of a shift. Keep in mind, we do use of force for things other than firearms too, so both of those are relevant time-wise.
Okay. Julie Lewis, how are school threats handled, and is your office contacted by the school administrators?
Yes, all the above. As far as they're handled by the administrator, there is close coordination between the school security staff and for instance, the principal of a particular school. When they become aware of it, they notify us, or vice versa. If we become aware, we notify them. So if it comes into the Fortify app, we're both getting it, right? But if it's something maybe a teacher comes across, they're telling immediately, and a lot of that depends what it is as well too. But that's one thing. I mean, we have a really good communication set up with our school security folks, and we work really hard to make sure that line of communication is going. It's just too important to make a mistake with it.
Will you or deputies make a formal and public apology to the dog's owner.
I actually have already done that, but I'll do it again. So, yeah, on behalf of the Walton County Sheriff's Office, a deputy did it that night. So just to be clear, you can see that on video. The deputy apologized to the owner and offers to do that. We should have followed through the next day. I think I've said that earlier, but I'll say it again. Yeah, I'll apologize on behalf of the Sheriff's Office because, first of all, there's just nothing, no good comes out of that. Just a short version of it. No, there's nothing good about the situation.
Abigail Jones, who pays for the gas when an employee takes a cop car home? That's actually, yeah.
Yeah, it's county gas because they're expected to be required back to respond back to duty.
Matthew Reyes, do you know if they plan on ever putting a red light in at Rock Hill 331 South intersection?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that we have talked about that before, and I don't know, do you guys know it? And Lindsay, have you heard anything about that? I have not heard it. It would be a great place for it. It's really dangerous turning onto Rock Hill there for sure. So
I've heard that they were planning on it, but I don't know that to be factually accurate.
yeah. Apologize, but I tell you actually just real quickly, if you want to send an email to DOT district office in Chipley, and I always call it the wrong district. This is District 3, right? Is that right, Corey? District 3?
Yes.
I always want to call it 1. It's not. It's District 3. So DOT District 3 in Chipley.
It's the Northwest Florida district.
Northwest Florida District, and you can email and ask them, and they'll let you know.
Believe it or not, you can also call them on the phone and you'll get a live person and they'll handle things.
Hey, that's a positive. Yeah, that's a positive.
Is audio available on ambulances for safety of the staff and patients? Where do we file complaints against ambulance drivers and techs? I think she means paramedics or EMTs.
So, that's an interesting, here goes a balance problem, right? So let me answer your second question first. You file that with us, you call and say, hey, this is my complaint, and then we assign it a complaint number, depending what it is. It depends on who looks at it, right? If it was not appropriate medical protocol, that's one thing. If it was rudeness, that's another thing, and so we've certainly dealt with those things before. We don't have an audio in there, and you have to understand the reason why, because you're at your most vulnerable, and the potential for that audio video coming out, and I know this sounds crazy, but there are people that do this for sport, that try to get copies of these videos and audios. Let's just say they don't like me, they don't like sheriff, so they're going to find some way to they think is going to hurt me, and they would hurt somebody else, and that's the problem. We have an obligation to protect our citizens, from that stuff as well too. So when you're the most vulnerable, when you could be potentially maybe not in your right mind, not coherent, partially undressed, saying things that you just because you're on the medication, that's really not the time to have have an audio on you. I don't think. Now somebody may disagree with me about that, but that's kind of where I come down with it.
Leslie say, is there a specific reason why deputies haven't apologized to Mr. Pylon? Do you think that would resonate? I
kind of think of the short version. Like I said, we tried to reach out after the fact. You have to realize that we just found out about, again, the audio afterwards. So somebody did that night. But no, since then, I think when we had reached out, there was some discussion that, just doesn't want to have that discussion. And I understand. My dog, I would feel the same way.
A question, any update on the new fire stations?
Yes. I'll start in Glendale first because they have finally started moving dirt at the Glendale Fire Station. So that is at Highway 2 and 331. So we're excited to finally start moving forward. The Choctaw Beach Fire Station, which has been the bane of my existence, I think that thing has been in planning or construction for about 4 years now. But it is almost done. It is getting there. There was some problems with the engineering design, and between them and the contractor, the county was kind of maintaining and looking at that for us. But we're getting close there. That should be done in a relatively short order of time. It was supposed to be done back in July, and quite frankly, we think that significantly impacted our ability to get what's called a CDEP grant for a new fire station in Mossy Head. I think the fact we had not disclosed or disposed of that grant probably hurt our ability to get that. We'll try again next year. But listen, the same problems you hear about people having with permitting and building, the struggles of that, whether that's at the state or federal level, The sheriff's office doesn't get an exemption of that. We go through all that permitting process in the same way, and it is exceedingly difficult to get done, get moved forward. So,
Yolanda Decker, why doesn't the fire department have cameras on their trucks so people can see the whole event, not just when the deputies show up?
yeah, I think we actually answered that earlier, simply because so many of what they do, about 90%, 95% of the calls that go actually are medical related, and you can have some people in really vulnerable positions that would be captured by those videos. So that's really the reason why.
Mark Holmes, subject change. Can we please get a consistent deputy or posse at the J.D. Miller intersection on weekday mornings? We have families and teenage drivers trying to connect to get to Seacoast and South Walton. Someone directing traffic there is sporadic. Also, get him a light or something. I don't want them getting hit either. Getting our kids to and from school should be the priority, no questions asked.
Yeah, it's busy.
In fact,
It's busy.
it's funny because Charlotte Voss is one of our community service officers.
Right.
She is fantastic.
Yes.
She's in the north end of the county, and she had reached out to me a few years back about she directs traffic at Mossy Head School.
Yeah, right.
And we actually had a resident reach out to us asking for them to hold stop signs.
Yeah.
And I just went ahead and ordered them some
Yeah.
like large stop signs that they could hold. But Mark's right, like, and especially when
No, he's 100%
daylight
right.
saving comes around,
Yeah.
and it's dark in the mornings and it's dark at night, maybe some sort of lit handheld baton or something would go a long way.
And, and the other thing too, we had actually taught, and even talking about advertising for, I'm going to call it crossing guards. It's really not a crossing guard, because if you look at where people turn on 98, but we wanted to see what the willingness of the public, who would have an interest in assisting with that, because you have to realize, so take south to where he's talking about J.D. Miller for just a second. You have a deputy that is going to be on 98 and 331, right? So you have a posse person, so that's 2 people per school. That doesn't even include getting out of the backside of that school. So, the more help you can get, the better it is. And that's really for a limited time frame. You don't need to hire somebody to work the rest of the time. We really could use I'm going to call it a crossing guard. That's not what it is, but that's what I mean. And so we've kind of looked at trying to start that program up and just see what the community's interest in of, who would be somebody maybe that was retired or wanted a part-time, morning and afternoon school job to assist with that. It would be a huge assistance to us. Because we've had some principals, trying to help as well too, and that can get, particularly at Dune Lakes is one of them I think about, where they've tried to help, moving people in and out of there. It's tough, particularly if you're going on to 98, people trying to get in and out of 98.
Beth Childry, why isn't there more deputies patrolling Highway 90 from 331 to Mossy Head?
So, it's one of those things, when you don't see them, you don't think they're there. Does that make sense? There's actually, they stay pretty busy out there, but Mossy Head's a 90 is a 2-lane road. It's a little similar to 20. If you didn't see them, they weren't there, right? If they're in Oakwood Hills, or if they're up off of, somewhere around the Blackstone, or they're not on 20, in your mind, they're not there. So we try to there's always somebody there. If somebody has to pull out and go somewhere, we send somebody else. It just depends where they're at on any given time of day.
Loretta Martinez is asking about a shooting in Defuniak Springs. That is a Defuniak Springs police case. That's their jurisdiction, so we're not investigating it. Just FYI, the shooting that happened where someone died, that would be best answered by their agency. We weren't in charge of that investigation. Obviously, we've been on for about an hour and a half, a little bit over. We've addressed the Mixon Road incident with the dogs. We've talked about moving forward from that incident. We've talked about Brendan Souter being arrested. You talked about the school threats.
The illegal immigration.
Illegal immigration.
We didn't talk about a couple of things real quick that I know it's an hour and a half, but I want to kind of touch on just real quickly, which is kind of a neat program where Advanced Auto Parts reached out to us. They're about to have a grand opening. And, sometimes deputies stop people for equipment violations, tail lights out, brake lights out, things of that nature. And they reached out and said, hey, look, if you've come in contact with somebody over the next month or two and they have an equipment violation, we will be willing to give basically a gift card to help fix that violation instead of getting a ticket, maybe to give you an opportunity to get it fixed. So that's kind of a cool thing a local business is doing for us as well. We're also in the middle of a diaper drive. So if you come into the South Walton substation, you will see. Corey, you want to elaborate on that just real quickly? It's a couple of years we've done this now.
It's the second year we've done it. It's called Pack the Patrol Car. This month specifically, Caring and Sharing of South Walton collects diapers, new diapers. There is a need in the community. Hundreds of thousands of diapers are requested through Caring and Sharing, and they just ask for our help. So we run a Pack the Patrol Car event, and the patrol car is parked at the Santa Rosa Beach substation, and you can drop off diapers until October 15th.
Very good. Kind of a cool project. I'm trying to see if we missed anything else. I've got my little board up here. Anything, Corey, that we wanted to touch that we didn't get a chance to, or anything of that nature?
No, not so far.
Okay.
Sasha Eastburn had a good question, and I want you to talk about your meetings with your staff. She said, how often do you as a sheriff review ongoing investigations, and does it depend on that investigation, or is that left to other departments?
So it really depends what that investigation is. So for instance, what I do on a Monday morning is I get, well, first of all, every morning I get a copy of what happened the previous night before, right? And that's typically from patrol or any kind of high risk incident. From investigations, typically on a Monday, I'll come in and say, is there anything new that you're investigating between what that's happened in the previous week? Other than that, it has to get to a certain level before I see it. In other words, so there's hundreds of cases that would be under investigation. If it gets into something that what we would call high profile, a large theft, shooting incident, something that is a little more serious, then I have those briefed a little more often, right? So I stay more intimately involved in those things than I do just maybe a normal fraud investigation, right? Or a normal traffic crash or some version of that. So it just really depends what it is. They normally come and kind of give me a briefing, but unless there becomes a holdup, unless there's something, it's not being moved forward, it's not going to be able to make an arrest, and it's at a certain level, that's really when I become involved with it. I meet with the state's attorney here, the chief assistant who runs Walton County, and we kind of talk about what the big cases are, and then kind of move forward from there. So I hope that answers your question.
I wonder if you could answer. I'm seeing kind of a trend in the question, and just hypothetically, if you were interacting with a deputy, could you request that their body camera be on?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And typically, when are they permitted to be on?
Typically, if they're on a call, if they're assigned to a call, that's normally when they go. If your blue lights are activated, they're automatically turned on. So, but I have to tell you, so many people do not like to be recorded. Now we don't. Just to be fair, we don't give you that option on a lot of these calls. A lot of them we turn them on anyways. We have to have it on. But if you walk up to Debbie and say, "Hey, I want you to turn on a recorder when I talk to you," they're gonna turn it on, for sure. So I can tell you that in the complaint world, I just know this for a fact, is 95% of the time those body cameras clear the deputies of these complaints. Really 95, probably plus. Why? Because they know the camera is on. They're 100% aware that the camera is on. So,
Dare Dean. I want to throw this in there. Shout out to Deputy Woods down in Freeport for the amazing ride along and good demeanor. We appreciate that,
Francis
Dare.
is good.
Thank you. Francis Woods
always got
actually spent a lot of time in South Florida as a deputy. Sheriff, I know we've been on about almost 2 hours now. Just kind of wrap up for us. What's important to you coming out of this, and kind of people are upset, and rightfully so.
Sure, absolutely. So there's a kind of multiple levels to this. At the end of the day, we have to accept our responsibility for what we didn't do well, and I have to accept that because I'm the sheriff, and we have to be better, do better. That's the short version of it. I wish I could tell you this is the last time I'll ever be in front of you apologizing for a mistake of a deputy sheriff or a firefighter or whoever. That's probably not the case, right? My responsibility is to try and correct it and to set an expectation. There's nobody in the building that thought this was going to end well once we were aware of it. Nobody thought that, oh, well, they're not going to say anything to me. Trust me, there's nobody that thought that. The other thing, and I think this is an important thing to consider, we don't run from these things. We don't run from these things. We get out here and we address it, and we try to move forward. We try to be better. What I hope comes from this is that we have maybe a little better understanding from some of the staff. Corey, you and I talked about this before, about how do you, it's one thing to hold people accountable. It's how do you prevent this from happening again, right? And I think it's a little bit like a garden. What I mean by that is you have to weed your garden all the time. You have to water your garden. You have to take care of it all the time, because you can think it's going well and then step away from it, and guess what? There's weeds growing. So it takes constant work. I do not think this is a reflection of the men and women of the Walton County Sheriff's Office. I don't think that's the case. I'm not obtuse. I don't just stick my head in the sand and go, oh, this never happens. I know that we have issues and times that people are on their best behavior, just like many other people. But at the same time, we have a higher expectation. It's kind of like the Matthew principle, right? We've talked about this before. Whose much is given, much is expected. And we just have to accept this and move forward and figure out how to be better. And who it hurts is and I've heard this from multiple deputies, it's every other deputy out there who's been, really working to do a good job, that they're kicked in the shin over this. And for those two individuals, they have to figure out how to reestablish trust, not just with the community, but inside their own organization. They have to do that because everybody's getting their teeth kicked over this, right? So that's something they have to learn. It is in everybody's interest for them to be better. Bottom line, it's in everybody's interest for them to be better. So that's kind of where I come down with it. I also don't let perfect be the enemy of better. We try to do the things that matter. We try to come out here. I was telling Corey before we got on air, somebody was complaining about the frequency we do Sheriff Live. And I kind of laughed a little bit. I said, well, we're the only people in the country that take live questions from the public. And yet that's not good enough for some people, right? And the truth is, I can't let that dictate the way we do business. We have to do business a certain way. And so when you put yourself out there for live calls and live shows and these kind of things, you'll have a litany of people that every week this is what they're looking for, an opportunity, right? But I can't let that change the way we're going to do business here. And I'm not going to let it change the way we do business here. And we're not going to stop doing the Sheriff Live because people ask, mean questions or malicious questions or whatever, because people are entitled to this public hearing. I think they're entitled to this public space to do this. So that's why we do it. It's kind of like we were talking about, soon to be Commissioner Curry, about the public space, about community meetings. We're doing this when nobody else is doing it. And I think there is a little bit of credit to be given in that, to try and stay the line, hold the line, and be accountable like that. So anyway, with that, we will be back I'm looking to see if I missed anything on our list. We'll be back in probably a couple weeks. Now listen, if we do it on a Tuesday night, don't lose your mind, okay? It may be, I promise it'll be okay, because I know somebody's really worried about it being Monday. Was there some top secret reason it was on Monday? Did you know what it was? Other than my wedding anniversary, which is
There was not.
another bit. Well, there must have been something, because they were seriously concerned about that. Man, it's probably the same people that complain at every Board of County Commissioners meeting, if I was guessing. But that's just me. Anyway, look forward to seeing you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your understanding. And you know what? You have righteous anger in this regard. I can't say anything about it other than that. We'll just have to do better. Thank you for your time.